You know that moment when the room goes completely silent? Not a peaceful silence, the kind where every single person stops breathing, and the only thing you can hear is the sound of your own heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. That happened to me on the night I was supposed to be the happiest woman in the world. My name is Elena, and this is the story of how my engagement dinner became my wake-up call. Let me rewind a little. I had been with Mark for 3 years. 3 years of laughing at his bad jokes, holding his hand through his father's criticism, and building a life from nothing. I worked 2 jobs while putting myself through nursing school. Mark was a junior accountant at his dad's firm, a job his father gave him out of pity, not pride. But I didn't care about any of that. I loved him, or at least, I loved who I thought he was. His father, Richard, was a different story. From the very first dinner I had with that family, I felt his cold eyes studying me like I was a line item on a balance sheet. He asked what car I drove. He asked about my parents' house. He asked if I had any family money. At the time, I laughed it off. I told myself he was just an old-fashioned man who wanted to protect his son. But the truth was simpler and uglier. Richard never saw me as family. He saw me as a threat, and Mark never defended me. Not once. Still, I convinced myself that our love was enough. So when Mark got down on one knee 6 months ago, I said yes without hesitation. The ring was modest, a small diamond on a thin silver band. And I adored it. Not because it was expensive, but because it was his. But Richard insisted on throwing an engagement dinner. A fancy restaurant. His friends. My family. Everyone. I remember standing in front of the mirror that night, smoothing down my navy blue dress, the one I bought on clearance for $23. My mother pinned a small flower in my hair. She said, "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Tonight is your night." I believed her. I walked into that restaurant with hope in my chest. I left it with nothing but ashes, because halfway through the appetizers, after his father whispered something in his ear, Mark stood up. His face was red. His fists were clenched. And he looked at me, the woman who had loved him through job losses, through his father's cruelty, through sleepless nights, and he shouted loud enough for the entire room to hear, "You're a gold digger." Behind him, his father smirked, and in that moment, my whole world collapsed. I wish I could tell you that I fought back, that I stood up and listed every bill I had paid for him, every time I had covered his share of rent, every sacrifice I had made. But I didn't, because the truth was worse than the insult. The truth was that Mark believed it. I could see it in his eyes. He had been poisoned by his father's whispers for so long that he actually thought I was using him. Me, the woman who had never asked him for a single luxury. The woman who had worn the same winter coat for 5 years so she could save for their future. I looked at his mother. She was staring at her plate, her face pale. I looked at my own mother. Tears were already streaming down her cheeks. And then I looked at Richard. That smirk. That horrible, smug, victorious smirk. He had won. He had finally broken us. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply set my fork down, stood up, and picked up my purse. Mark grabbed my wrist, not hard, but enough to make me flinch. "Where are you going?" he demanded. His voice was shaking. I think even he was surprised by what he had done. I pulled my hand away slowly. "I'm leaving," I said. "Not the dinner. You." His father let out a small laugh. And that sound, that ugly, dismissive laugh, was the last thing I heard before I walked out the door. The drive home was a blur. I remember parking outside our apartment and just sitting there for an hour, staring at the engagement ring on my finger. It felt like a lie now. Every hope I had attached to that little diamond had been crushed under the weight of 2 words, gold digger. When I finally went inside, I did something I had never done before. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything, every bank transfer I had made to cover his half of the rent, every receipt for groceries I bought for both of us, every time I had paid for his car repair, his mother's birthday gift, his father's surprise dinner that he forgot to reimburse. I even found an old spreadsheet I had kept during a rough month when I was tracking every penny, not because I didn't trust him, but because I was trying to survive. That spreadsheet told a very different story than the one Mark shouted across the restaurant. Over the next 3 days, my phone exploded with messages. Mark called 47 times. He texted, "You're overreacting. Come back and talk." My dad was just joking. Just joking. He thought humiliating me in front of both our families was a joke. I didn't respond to a single message. Instead, I packed my things. I moved into my mother's spare bedroom, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg for an apology. I wasn't going to cry for an explanation. I was going to show them what a real gold digger looks like by proving I never needed a single penny of theirs. But my revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be silent. And it would be perfect. 2 weeks later, I sent Mark a single envelope. Inside was the engagement ring, not because I was returning it out of kindness, but because I wanted him to see it every day and remember what he threw away. Attached to the ring was a one-page letter. No anger, no accusations, just a list. On the left side, every dollar he had ever spent on me during our 3 years together. Total? Less than $800. On the right side, every dollar I had spent on him, on us, on keeping us afloat. Total? Over $14,000. At the bottom, I wrote 3 words. You owe me. I never expected him to pay. That wasn't the point. The point was to hand him the truth in writing, cold, undeniable, mathematical. He couldn't call me a gold digger ever again without knowing in his heart that I was the one who had been digging him out of his own financial grave. The real revenge came 6 months later. Mark's father, Richard, had a minor stroke, nothing life-threatening, but enough to force him to step back from the family business. And without his father's protection, Mark's incompetence became impossible to hide. He was let go within 3 months. I heard through a mutual friend that he tried to call me. I had changed my number. Meanwhile, I finished nursing school with honors. I now work in a pediatric unit, helping children who have never been called gold diggers, only fighters. I met someone new, not because I was looking, but because I had finally learned to value myself first. Last year, I ran into Mark's mother at a grocery store. She hugged me and whispered, "He still talks about you. He says losing you was the biggest mistake of his life." I smiled and said, "Tell him I said thank you. He saved me from marrying a man who didn't deserve me." Pause. Here is the moral I want to leave with you. When someone calls you a name that isn't true, a gold digger, a liar, a user, don't waste your energy fighting them in the moment. Walk away. Document everything. Build your own success. And let the silence become the loudest revenge they will ever hear, because the best revenge isn't screaming back. It's becoming so strong, so happy, and so whole that their accusations become nothing more than a sad, distant echo. I'm Elena, and I stopped digging for love in empty places.